Chapter 1. The night they came for her. The rain fell like shattered glass against the cabin windows, each drop a reminder that Sarah Nightingale was running out of places to hide. She pressed her back against the worn wooden door, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts as she listened to the sounds outside. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Circling the perimeter of her refuge like predators testing the boundaries of a cage. "We know you're in there, Omega." The voice that cut through the storm was male, cruel, tinged with amusement. "Your old pack wants you back. Seems they realized too late what they threw away." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the fireplace poker, the only weapon she had. 3 months. She'd managed to stay hidden for 3 months since the rejection ceremony, since Alpha Marcus had declared her unworthy of the Silvercrest bloodline, and cast her out into the human world with nothing but the clothes on her back and a warning never to return. Now they wanted her back? The irony would have been funny if she wasn't so terrified. A howl split the night, long, resonant, and far too close. Then another, and another. Sarah's wolf stirred inside her, weak and wounded as it had been since the rejection, but present enough to recognize the threat. These weren't Silvercrest wolves. The scent that seeped through the cabin's cracks was foreign, darker, tinged with something ancient and wild that made her instincts scream danger. "Last chance, little Omega. Come out and we'll make this quick. Stay in there and we'll burn you out." Sarah's mind raced. The cabin belonged to an elderly human woman who'd taken pity on her, offering her this isolated sanctuary in the Cascade Mountains in exchange for help with the property. Mrs. Chen was visiting her daughter in Portland. No one would hear Sarah scream. No one would come. She was alone. The first window shattered inward, spraying glass across the hardwood floor. Sarah stumbled backward, raising the poker as a massive gray wolf leaped through the opening, its eyes glowing amber in the firelight. She swung wildly, catching it across the muzzle. The wolf yelped and retreated, but 2 more were already circling through the broken window. "This is how I die," Sarah thought, her back hitting the far wall. "Rejected by my own kind and hunted like prey by strangers." Her wolf whimpered, powerless to shift without a pack bond to draw strength from. The rejection had severed something vital inside her, leaving her neither fully human nor fully wolf, just a broken thing caught between worlds. The largest wolf, the one who'd spoken before in his human form, padded forward. His coat was black as midnight, shot through with silver markings that seemed to shimmer with their own light. When he shifted, the transformation was seamless, brutal in its efficiency. He stood before her naked and unashamed, a man who wore violence like a second skin. "You really are pathetic," he said, tilting his head as he studied her. "No wonder Silvercrest threw you out. But orders are orders. Someone wants you alive, which is the only reason you're still breathing." "Who?" Sarah managed to choke out. "Who wants me?" The man smiled, revealing teeth that were still too sharp to be human. "Wouldn't you like to—" His words died in a wet gurgle. Sarah blinked, unable to process what she was seeing. One moment the man had been standing 3 feet away, threatening her. The next, he was lifted clear off his feet, a massive hand wrapped around his throat, his body dangling like a child's doll. The hand belonged to someone, something, that shouldn't exist. The creature was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with a hybrid form that was neither fully wolf nor fully man. Midnight black fur covered a muscular frame that radiated raw, primal power. But it was the eyes that froze Sarah in place. They were silver, pure molten silver, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. The black wolf's companions scattered, their growls turning to whimpers as they fled back through the broken window. Their leader struggled weakly, his feet kicking at empty air. You made a mistake coming here, the creature said, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through Sarah's bones. This territory is under my protection. She is under my protection. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed the man through the window he'd entered, the sound of impact followed by a pained howl and the rapid retreat of paws against muddy ground. Then there was silence. Sarah stood frozen, the poker still raised, though her arms shook so badly she could barely hold it. The creature turned to face her fully, and she saw the intelligence in those silver eyes, ancient, knowing, and completely focused on her. "You're safe now," he said, his form already beginning to shift back into something more human. The transformation was slower than the other wolves had been, more controlled, and when it was done, a man stood before her. A very naked, very built man with black hair that fell past his shoulders and those same impossible silver eyes. "Who?" Sarah's voice failed her. She tried again. "What are you?" He tilted his head, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm the reason those wolves won't come back. And you," he took a step closer, ignoring her raised weapon, "are something I wasn't expecting to find in my territory." "Your territory? This is human land." "Human land. Shifter land. The boundaries aren't as clear as your old pack pretended they were." He moved with predatory grace to the broken window, scanning the darkness beyond. "They'll regroup and report back to whoever sent them. You have maybe 6 hours before they return with reinforcements." "I can't leave," Sarah said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I have nowhere else to go." He turned back to her, and for a moment, something that might have been sympathy flickered across his features. "You do now. Get whatever you can't live without. We're leaving in 5 minutes. I don't even know your name." The man smiled, and it was a wild, dangerous thing that made her wolf sit up and take notice for the first time since the rejection. "Cale Thornwood. And you, Sarah Nightingale of the fallen Silvercrest Pack, are about to learn that everything you thought you knew about our kind was a carefully constructed lie." He extended his hand toward her, palm up, an invitation and a challenge rolled into one. Sarah looked at that hand, at the man who'd just killed to protect her, at the ruins of her temporary sanctuary. She thought about Marcus's rejection, about the pack that had thrown her away like garbage, about the hunters who'd come for her in the night. She thought about the fact that she had nothing left to lose. Sarah dropped the poker. It clattered against the wooden floor, the sound sharp in the sudden quiet. Then she reached out and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and certain. "Good choice," Kyle said softly. "Now let's get you somewhere those wolves won't dare follow." As he led her toward the door, Sarah's wolf stirred again, stronger this time, responding to something in this stranger's presence that felt like recognition, like coming home after a long exile. She didn't understand it. But as they stepped out into the storm together, his large frame shielding her from the worst of the rain, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed forever. And this time, maybe that wasn't such a terrible thing. Chapter 2. The Path Through Shadow Territory. Kyle's truck was older than Sarah expected, a battered Ford that had seen better decades, not the sleek vehicle she'd imagined someone with his power would drive. He'd grabbed a worn jacket from behind the seat and shrugged it on before helping her inside, his hand steadying her elbow with a gentleness that contradicted the violence she'd witnessed moments before. "Seatbelt," he said, his voice carrying an edge of command that made her wolf respond instinctively. Sarah buckled in with shaking hands, her small backpack clutched against her chest. Everything she owned in the world fit into one bag. The thought would have been depressing if she wasn't still processing the fact that she was alive. Cale drove in silence, his silver eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, and the headlights cut through the mist like knives. Sarah studied him from the corner of her eye, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with casual confidence, the tension that seemed to radiate from him even in stillness. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. Sarah jerked her gaze away, heat flooding her cheeks. "I'm trying to figure out if I just made a massive mistake. Did you want to stay and find out what those wolves plan to do with you?" "No, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're not exactly a known quantity either. For all I know, you're leading me somewhere worse." That made him smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "If I wanted to hurt you, Sarah, you'd already be hurt. I don't play with my food." The casual brutality of the statement should have frightened her. Instead, her wolf perked up with interest, recognizing the honesty in his words. Predators didn't lie about what they were. Only prey did. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You said this is your territory, but you don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Cale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. The truck climbed higher into the mountains, leaving the main road for a narrow gravel path that wound between ancient pines. Finally, he spoke. "I know what it's like to be rejected by your own kind. To be cast out and hunted." His jaw tightened. "I know what it's like to have nowhere to run." The vulnerability in those words startled her. Sarah had expected arrogance, dominance, all the traits alpha males typically displayed. She hadn't expected pain that mirrored her own. "Silvercrest wasn't my first pack," she found herself saying, the confession spilling out before she could stop it. "I was born to the Moonshadow Pack in Montana. They died, all of them, when I was 12. Rogue attack. I was the only survivor." Cale's hands tightened on the wheel. "Silvercrest took you in?" "Took me in, used me, threw me away when I couldn't produce an heir for their precious alpha." Bitterness coated every word. Turns out being an orphaned omega with a defective wolf isn't desirable breeding stock. "Your wolf isn't defective." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You saw me back there. I couldn't even shift to defend myself. The rejection bond broke something inside me. I'm useless." The truck swerved suddenly, pulling off onto a small clearing barely visible between the trees. Cale killed the engine and turned to face her fully, his silver eyes blazing with an intensity that pinned her in place. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "The only thing broken is their understanding of what you are. The rejection didn't weaken you, Sarah. It severed their control over you. There's a difference." "That doesn't make sense." "You're still thinking like Pac, like someone who needs permission to be whole." He leaned closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell pine and rain and something wild that made her pulse quicken. "What if I told you that traditional pack bonds are a cage? A way to control and subjugate wolves who are stronger than their alphas can handle?" Sarah's breath caught. "That's not... Pack bonds give us strength. Without them, we're nothing." "Is that what they taught you?" Cale's laugh was harsh. Of course they did. Can't have the lower ranks realizing they might not need their precious alpha's approval to survive. He reached out, slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently took her hand. The moment his skin touched hers, something sparked. A current of energy that raced up her arm and straight into her chest where her wolf resided. The creature inside her, dormant and wounded for months, suddenly lifted its head with interest. "What are you doing?" Sarah whispered, even as she felt warmth spreading through her body, pushing back against the cold emptiness the rejection had left behind. "Showing you what you really are." Kyle's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture intimate and grounding. "Close your eyes. Don't think about shifting or pack bonds. Just feel." Every instinct told her this was dangerous, that trusting a stranger was how people died. But Sarah was so tired of being afraid, so exhausted from feeling broken and worthless. What did she have to lose? She closed her eyes. At first, there was nothing but the sound of rain on metal and Kale's steady breathing. Then, slowly, she felt it. A pulse of energy, ancient and vast, flowing from his hand into hers. It didn't feel like a pack bond, which was sharp and binding and possessive. This was different. Older. It felt like earth and moon and wild places that had never known human feet. Her wolf stirred, not with the weakness she'd grown accustomed to, but with genuine curiosity. The creature padded forward in her mind's eye, approaching the source of this strange power. "That's it," Kale murmured, his voice a low encouragement. "Your wolf knows. She's always known." The pack bond was suffocating her, not sustaining her. Sarah's eyes snapped open. "What are you?" Kyle released her hand and sat back, but the warmth he'd ignited still lingered in her veins. In the dim light of the truck's cabin, his features seemed sharper, more defined, almost otherworldly. "I'm what the council tried to erase from history. What they've spent centuries convincing our kind doesn't exist anymore." He turned his gaze back to the windshield, his expression hardening. "I'm a primordial, one of the first bloodlines. The wolves that walked before the packs formed and corrupted everything we were meant to be." The word hung between them like a myth made flesh. Sarah had heard whispers of primordials in the stories elders told. Ancient shifters who predated modern pack structure, who could shift at will regardless of the moon, who answered to no alpha because they were the source from which all alpha power flowed. She'd thought they were legends. "They're supposed to be extinct," she said faintly. "We're supposed to be." Kale started the engine again, the rumble filling the silence. "Turns out it's hard to kill something that's been hunting these mountains for 3,000 years. 3,000 years. The number was incomprehensible. "And those wolves tonight?" Sarah asked. "The ones who came for me?" "Shadow Guard. Mercenaries who work for the Council of Alphas." His expression darkened. "Which means someone high up knows you, exists and wants you badly enough to send professionals. The question is why?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm nobody. A rejected Omega with no pack, no family, no—" "You survived the Moonshadow Massacre." Kale cut her off, his voice sharp. "You were 12 years old and you survived an attack that killed an entire pack of seasoned warriors. Has it never occurred to you to ask why?" The question hit her like a physical blow. In 13 years, no one had ever asked her that. They'd called her lucky, blessed, traumatized, but never questioned the impossibility of a child surviving what trained fighters couldn't. "I hid," she whispered. "I was small. They didn't see me." "Or," Kale said quietly, "something made them unable to see you. Something in your bloodline that activated when you needed it most." The truck climbed higher, entering territory that felt different from the forests below. The trees here were older, thicker, their branches forming a canopy so dense that even in daylight it would be twilight beneath them. Sarah felt the change in the air, a weight, a presence, as if the land itself was aware of their passage. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere the Shadow Guard won't follow. Somewhere even the Council fears to tread." Kyle glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw something that might have been hope in his ancient eyes. "Welcome to the Thornwood Sanctuary, Sarah, the last free territory in North America." As they drove deeper into the primordial forest, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just entering a new place. She was entering a new life. And there would be no going back. Chapter 3. The Sanctuary of Forgotten Wolves. The Thornwood Sanctuary wasn't what Sarah expected. She'd imagined something primitive. Caves or rough shelters befitting an ancient wolf who'd lived for millennia. Instead, as Kale's truck emerged from the dense forest into a hidden valley, she saw a small village nestled between towering pines and a crystalline lake that reflected the breaking dawn. Cabins built from dark wood and stone dotted the landscape, smoke curling from their chimneys. Gardens flourished despite the late season, and she could see figures moving between buildings. People, or perhaps shifters, going about their morning routines. It looked peaceful, normal, almost human. "How many live here?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed with something like reverence. 43, as of last week. Kyle navigated the truck down a winding path toward a larger cabin set apart from the others, positioned on a slight rise overlooking the valley. All of them rejected, exiled, or fleeing pack law. This is neutral ground. No alphas. No hierarchy. No one controls anyone else. The concept was so foreign to everything Sarah had been taught that she struggled to comprehend it. How do you maintain order without structure? Who said there's no structure? Kale parked and killed the engine, turning to face her. There are rules, but they're about respect and survival, not submission and dominance. People contribute what they can. We protect each other. And if someone can't follow those simple principles, they leave. And if they don't want to leave? His smile was sharp. Then I make them want to. Sarah believed him. As they exited the truck, several figures emerged from nearby cabins, drawn by the sound of the vehicle. Sarah tensed, her instincts screaming danger despite Kale's proximity. Strange wolves meant threats. That lesson had been burned into her by two different packs. "Easy," Kale murmured, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. "They're curious, not aggressive. You're safe here." A woman approached first, tall and lean, with copper-colored hair braided down her back and eyes that reminded Sarah of amber. She moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, and when she smiled, it was genuine. "Kale, you've been gone 3 days. We were starting to worry." Her gaze shifted to Sarah, curiosity brightening her expression. "And you've brought someone new." "This is Sarah." Kale's hand found the small of Sarah's back, a gesture so natural she almost didn't notice it. Almost. She needed sanctuary. The shadow guard tracked her to the boundary. The woman's expression darkened. The council is getting bold, sending their dogs this deep into neutral territory. She extended her hand to Sarah. "I'm Lyra. Welcome to Thornwood. Any enemy of the council is a friend of ours." Sarah shook her hand cautiously, surprised by the warmth in Lyra's grip. "Thank you. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." A man stepped forward, older than Lyra, with silver threading through his dark beard and scars crossing his forearms. "We've all been where you are. Lost, hunted, broken by a system that values power over people." His eyes met hers with understanding. "My name is Rowan. I was second of the Iron Peak pack before I challenged an alpha who was abusing pack members. I lost, barely escaped with my life." Others came forward then, each sharing their name and a fragment of their story. A young man named Finn who'd been exiled for loving another male. A woman called Mira who'd refused an arranged mating. A teenager named Ash whose pack had tried to kill them for being born differently, unable to fully shift in either direction. Every single one of them had been thrown away by the pack system. Every single one of them had found home here. "All right, everyone back to your routines," Kyle said, his voice carrying authority without aggression. "Sarah needs rest, and I need to make some calls. Lyra, can you—" "Already on it." Lyra looped her arm through Sarah's with easy familiarity. "Come on, new girl. Let's get you settled before Kale works himself into a protective frenzy. He gets cranky when people he cares about are threatened." Sarah glanced back at Kale, catching the slight tightening around his eyes at Lyra's words. "He cares about me?" They'd known each other for less than 3 hours. That couldn't be right. But Cale didn't correct Lyra. He simply held Sarah's gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them, before nodding once and turning toward his cabin. Lyra led Sarah to a smaller cabin near the lake's edge. Inside, it was simple but comfortable. A bed with thick quilts, a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and large windows overlooking the water. "The bathroom is through there," Lyra said, pointing. "Hot water is courtesy of solar panels and a bit of ingenuity. We're off-grid but not primitive." She moved to the fireplace and began building a fire with practiced efficiency. "You look exhausted. When was the last time you slept?" "I don't remember." Sarah set her backpack down, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. Her throat tightened. "Why are you all being so nice to me? You don't know anything about me." Lyra paused, sitting back on her heels. "Because Cale brought you here, and because I remember what it felt like to arrive broken and terrified, convinced I'd never be whole again." She smiled softly. "Also, I've never seen Cale look at anyone the way he looked at you when he thought you weren't watching. That's reason enough." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. "We just met. Primordials don't experience time the way we do. 3 hours for you might feel like 3 lifetimes for him." Lyra stood, brushing ash from her hands. "I'm not saying you owe him anything. I'm saying there's something between you two that even he probably doesn't fully understand yet. And trust me, watching Cale be confused about his own feelings is going to be entertaining." Despite everything, Sarah laughed. It felt strange, rusty from disuse, but genuine. "Get some sleep," Lyra said, heading for the door. "I'll bring food later. And Sarah, you're packed now. Even if we don't call it that, you're not alone anymore." The door closed softly behind her, leaving Sarah standing in the quiet cabin with tears streaming down her face. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said she belonged somewhere. She couldn't remember the last time she'd believed it might be true. Sarah moved to the window, looking out over the valley as the sun continued its rise, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. In the distance, she could see Kyle on his cabin's porch, phone pressed to his ear, his expression grave. Even from here, she could feel his presence, that strange pull that had awakened her wolf and made her feel things she had no right to feel for someone she barely knew. Her hand drifted to her chest, where her wolf stirred with something that felt almost like contentment. The creature had been silent for so long, broken by rejection and isolation. But here, in this place, with these people, with him, something was changing. Sarah pulled off her muddy boots and crawled into the bed, still fully clothed, too exhausted to care about propriety. The quilts smelled like cedar and lavender, clean and safe. As she closed her eyes, her last thought was of silver eyes that saw her not as a rejected Omega, not as damaged goods, not as something to be used and discarded, but as something precious worth protecting. For the first time in 3 months, Sarah Nightingale slept without nightmares. She woke to the sound of raised voices outside. The sun had shifted to late afternoon, meaning she'd slept for hours. Sarah rolled out of bed, her body stiff and protesting, and moved to the window. Down by the lake's edge, she could see Cale and another man facing off, their body language aggressive. The stranger was tall, nearly matching Cale's height, with golden hair and features that would have been beautiful if not for the sneer twisting them. He wore clothes that marked him as pack, well-tailored, expensive, everything Thornwood residents weren't. And he was pointing towards Sarah's cabin. Her stomach dropped as she recognized the pack insignia on his jacket. A silver crescent crossed with a blade. Silvercrest. Marcus had sent someone. And from the way Cale's body had gone deadly still, his hands clenched at his sides, Sarah knew that whoever this messenger was, they'd just made a fatal mistake coming here. She was out the door and running before her conscious mind caught up with her body. Whatever was about to happen, she wouldn't let Cale face it alone. Not when he'd already given her more in one night than her old pack had given her in 5 years. Not when her wolf was howling that this man, this impossible ancient creature, was somehow hers to protect as much as she was his. Chapter 4. The Alpha's Claim. Sarah's bare feet hit the cold ground as she ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. The valley that had seemed so peaceful hours ago now felt charged with violence waiting to erupt. She could see the tension in every line of Cale's body, the way the other sanctuary residents had emerged from their cabins, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. They were protecting their territory, protecting her. "Cale, wait!" she called out, but her voice was lost as the golden-haired messenger turned and his eyes locked onto her. Recognition flared in his gaze, followed by something that made her skin crawl. Possession. "There you are!" His voice was smooth, cultured, everything Marcus had valued in his pack members. "The Alpha will be pleased to know I found you unharmed. Well, mostly unharmed." His nose wrinkled as he looked her over. "You look feral, Sarah. 3 months running with humans and now hiding among Cale Thornwood's collection of broken toys. How far you've fallen." "She's fallen upward, Darius." Cale's voice was granite, each word precisely controlled. "And you have 30 seconds to leave my territory before I remove you in pieces." Darius laughed, the sound grating. "Still pretending to be civilized, Primordial? We all know what you really are. A relic. A beast that should have died out when the packs learned to organize, to evolve beyond base instinct." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "But I'm not here for you. I have a message for the Omega." "Don't call her that." The words came from Sarah herself, surprising everyone, including her. She stopped a few feet from Cale, fighting the urge to move closer to him, to seek shelter in his presence. "I'm not Silvercrest's Omega anymore. Marcus made that clear when he rejected me." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong." Darius's smile widened as he opened the envelope and removed a formal-looking document. "Alpha Marcus has reconsidered. In light of new information about your bloodline, he's prepared to reinstate you to the pack with full honors. The rejection bond will be dissolved through the Luna ceremony under the next full moon." He paused dramatically. "You're to become his mate, Sarah. Not just pack. His Luna." The words hit her like physical blows. Luna. The highest position a female wolf could hold. Second only to the Alpha himself. "No." The word came out strangled. "He can't just... I'm rejected. It's permanent. Everyone knows that." "Not if both parties agree to dissolution." Darius held up the document. "Marcus has already signed. All you need to do is accept, return to Silvercrest, and everything you lost will be restored. Status, protection, family." His voice dropped, taking on a persuasive tone. "You'll never have to run again, Sarah. Isn't that what you want?" It should have been tempting. 3 months ago, it would have been everything she'd dreamed of. But standing here, in this valley, with Cale's presence at her back and genuine community surrounding her, the offer felt like poison, wrapped in silk. "What new information?" Cale asked, his voice cutting through her spiraling thoughts. "What did you discover about her bloodline that suddenly makes a defective Omega valuable enough to reclaim?" Darius's expression flickered. Irritation quickly masked. "That's pack business, Thornwood. Above your pay grade. Everything involving someone under my protection is my business." Cale moved then, not toward Darius, but toward Sarah, placing himself slightly in front of her in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "And you still haven't answered the question." The golden-haired wolf's jaw tightened. For a moment, Sarah thought he wouldn't respond. Then he sighed, as if dealing with particularly slow children. "Fine. since you'll find out eventually anyway. He looked directly at Sarah. We discovered records in the pack archives. Hidden records about the Moonshadow massacre. You weren't just a survivor, Sarah. You were the target. The rogues didn't attack randomly. They were sent to eliminate your entire bloodline before you came of age. The ground seemed to tilt beneath Sarah's feet. What? Why would... Because your mother was from the Ashenblade line, one of the original bloodlines. Not quite primordial, but close enough to carry gifts that the council deemed too dangerous to exist. Darius's eyes gleamed with calculated interest. Gifts that apparently manifested in you when you were 12, allowing you to survive when everyone else died. Gifts that are now fully matured and incredibly valuable to the right pack. Sarah's mind reeled. Her mother had never spoken of being anything special. She'd been loving, strong, normal, or so Sarah had thought. What kind of gifts? The ability to hide in plain sight, to bend perception so others simply don't see you, don't register your presence even when you're standing right in front of them. Darius took a step closer, ignoring Kale's warning growl. The rogues couldn't find you because you made yourself invisible to them. And now Marcus believes you can extend that gift to others. Imagine an entire pack that could move unseen through enemy territory. The tactical advantage would be immeasurable. Understanding crashed over Sarah like a wave. He doesn't want me as his Luna. He wants me as a weapon. Does it matter? Darius spread his hands. You'll have power, protection, respect. Everything you were denied. All Marcus asks in return is your loyalty and your cooperation. She's not interested. Kale's voice had dropped to that dangerous register that made the air around them feel heavy. Take your offer and your Alpha's delusions back to Silvercrest. Tell Marcus that if he wants Sarah, he'll have to come through me. And I promise you that's not a fight he'll win. Darius's expression hardened. You'd start a war over one damaged Omega? The council won't allow it. They'll sanction your precious sanctuary, drive out everyone who's taken refuge here, and burn this valley to ash. Is she really worth that much, Thornwood? The question hung in the air, weighted with consequence. Sarah felt every eye on her, every resident waiting to see what would happen. These people had given her shelter, accepted her without question, and now their safety hung in the balance because of her. She couldn't let them suffer for her sake. I'll go. The words came out before she could second-guess them. Tell Marcus I'll return and hear his full offer. But I need 3 days to settle my affairs here. Sarah, no. Kyle turned to her, his silver eyes blazing with something that looked like betrayal. 3 days, she repeated, holding Darius's gaze. Then I'll come to Silvercrest myself. No escort. No force. That's my condition. Darius studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing whether this was a trick. Finally, he nodded. 3 days. But if you don't show, Marcus will take it as a declaration of hostility. And trust me, you don't want Silvercrest as an enemy. He tucked the document back into his jacket and looked at Kale. She's making the right choice, Primordial. You should be grateful she cares enough about your strays to sacrifice herself. With that, he shifted, the transformation smooth and practiced, and bounded away through the forest as a golden wolf, leaving silence in his wake. The moment he was gone, Kale rounded on her. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking that I won't let innocent people suffer because of me. Sarah shot back, her own anger rising to meet his. You heard him. The council will destroy this place. Everyone here will lose the only safe haven they have. I can't. So you'll just throw yourself back into a pack that rejected you? Become a breeding tool for an alpha who only wants you for what you can give him? Kyle's voice was rough with emotion. You think that's protecting these people? That's surrendering, Sarah. That's giving up. What choice do I have? Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I'm one person. This is a community. The math is simple. The math is bullshit. Kyle closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face, forcing her to look at him. You want to know why Darius's offer made me want to tear him apart? It's not about the sanctuary, though I'd fight for every person here. It's because the thought of you going back to that place, to that alpha, makes my wolf want to burn down everything between here and Silvercrest. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, gentle despite the fury in his voice. In 3,000 years, I have never felt this way about anyone. I don't understand it. I don't trust it. But I know with absolute certainty that letting you walk into Marcus's trap would destroy something in me that even centuries won't heal. Sarah's breath caught. Kale? 3 days, he said softly, his forehead coming to rest against hers. You gave us 3 days. Let me use them. Let me find another way. Please. She should say no. She should protect herself from hoping, from believing that someone might actually fight for her instead of just using her. But standing here, with his hands cradling her face and his presence wrapping around her like safety made solid, Sarah found herself nodding. 3 days, she whispered. But if we can't find another solution, we will. Kyle's certainty was absolute. I didn't survive 3 millennia by accepting defeat, and I sure as hell won't start now. He pulled back, but kept one hand linked with hers, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go completely. Come on, we need to call a sanctuary meeting. If the council is making moves, everyone needs to know what we're up against. As they walked back toward the main cabin, Sarah's wolf settled in her chest with something that felt almost like peace. For 3 days, she would let herself hope. For 3 days, she would let someone else fight beside her instead of facing the darkness alone. And if those 3 days ended in heartbreak and separation, at least she would have known what it felt like to be chosen, even if only for a moment. Chapter 5. Awakening the Ashen Blade. The sanctuary meeting lasted until well past midnight. 43 wolves, all with their own scars and stories, gathered in Kale's great room to discuss what Darius's visit meant for their future. Sarah had expected fear, maybe resentment that her presence had brought danger to their doorstep. Instead, she found determination. We don't abandon our own, Rowan had said, his scarred arms crossed over his chest. That's what makes us different from the packs. The council can threaten all they want. We've faced worse and survived. Now, hours later, Sarah sat on Kale's porch steps, wrapped in a blanket Lyra had pressed into her hands, watching the pre-dawn darkness over the lake. Sleep felt impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Darius's calculating expression, heard Marcus's rejection echoing in her memory, felt the weight of 43 lives depending on decisions she didn't know how to make. The door opened behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know it was Kale. She'd begun to recognize his presence the way she recognized her own heartbeat. Constant, grounding, essential. Can't sleep either? He asked, settling beside her on the steps. He'd changed into worn jeans and a dark Henley, and carried 2 steaming mugs. The scent of chamomile and honey drifted between them. Too much in my head. Sarah accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her hands around its warmth. Thank you. For the tea. For everything. Kale was quiet for a moment, staring out at the lake. When I was younger, and I mean truly young, maybe 200 years old, I thought I understood what it meant to care about someone. I had a mate. Her name was Isadora. Sarah's chest tightened, but she remained silent, sensing he needed to tell this story. She was human. Brilliant, fierce, beautiful. We had 17 years together before old age took her from me. His voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah could hear the ancient grief beneath it. I thought that was it. I'd had my chance at love, and losing her would be the worst pain I'd ever know. So I decided never to risk it again. 3,000 years, Sarah. That's how long I've kept that promise to myself. He turned to look at her then, and in the dim light, his silver eyes seemed to glow with their own luminescence. Until I smelled your fear in that cabin, and something in me just snapped. Every instinct I have was screaming to protect you, to keep you safe, to make sure no one ever hurt you again. And I didn't understand it because we'd never met. You were a stranger, but my wolf knew you. Kyle, I'm not telling you this to pressure you or make you feel obligated, he continued, his voice soft. I'm telling you because you deserve to know why I'm willing to go to war with the council over this. It's not just principle. It's not just about sanctuary law. It's because something in me recognized something in you, and I don't think that's coincidence. Sarah set down her mug with shaking hands. Darius said I can manipulate perception, make people not see me, but I don't know how I do it. I don't even remember doing it when I was 12. 1 minute the rogues were slaughtering my pack, and the next. I was alone in the silence. Everyone was dead, and I was covered in blood that wasn't mine, hiding in a closet they'd walked past a dozen times. Trauma can trigger gifts, Kyle said gently, especially in bloodlines like yours. The Ashenblades were known for their ability to walk between seen and unseen. Some called them shadow walkers. Others called them ghost wolves. He paused. But there's more to your bloodline than just invisibility. The Ashenblades were said to have another gift, one that scared the council enough to hunt them to near extinction. What gift? They could see truth, not just lies, actual truth, the essence of a person stripped of all deception and pretense. Kale's expression was serious. That's why the council wanted them gone. Imagine being an alpha who rules through manipulation and fear, only to have someone in your pack who can see through every lie, every political game, every false promise. The implications settled over Sarah like a weight. That's why Marcus really wants me back. Not just for tactical invisibility. He's planning something, and he needs to make sure no one can expose him. That would be my guess. Kale shifted slightly closer, and Sarah found herself leaning into his warmth without conscious thought. But here's what Darius and Marcus don't know. Gifts like yours don't work properly under pack bonds. The alpha connection suppresses individual power to maintain control. That's why you couldn't access your abilities when you were with Silvercrest. But now that I'm rejected, now you're free of that suppression. Your wolf is waking up, Sarah. I felt it yesterday when we touched. That wasn't just pack energy or mate bond potential. That was raw power that's been caged your entire life, finally starting to breathe. He held out his hand, palm up. Want to see if we can wake it up a little more? Sarah stared at his offered hand, her heart hammering. What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone? You won't hurt me. I'm a primordial, remember. We're built to withstand things that would destroy normal wolves. His smile was gentle, encouraging. And you won't hurt anyone else because I'll be right here to ground you if things get overwhelming. Trust me? Did she trust him? She'd known him barely 24 hours. Everything she'd been taught said trusting an alpha, even one who claimed to be different, was foolish, dangerous. But when she looked into those ancient silver eyes, Sarah couldn't find any deception. Only patience. Only hope that she might be brave enough to try. She placed her hand in his. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Energy surged up her arm, but this time it didn't stop at her chest. It flooded through her entire body, lighting up pathways she'd never known existed. Her wolf rose with a strength that stole her breath, No longer the broken, whimpering creature from yesterday, but something powerful, and wild, and right. Good, Kylie murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Don't fight it. Just let yourself feel. Close your eyes if it helps. Sarah did, and suddenly she could sense things beyond normal perception. She felt the life force of every creature in the valley. The sleeping residents in their cabins, the night birds in the trees, the fish in the lake. But more than that, she could see deeper. It was like looking through layers of reality to something fundamental underneath. She could see Kyle. Not just his physical form, but the truth of him. 3,000 years of memory and pain and loneliness, held together by iron will and purpose. She saw the moment he'd found Isadora, the joy that had bloomed in him. She saw the devastating grief when she'd died. She saw the long, empty centuries that followed, filled with protecting others because he couldn't protect the one who'd mattered most. And she saw the moment he'd caught her scent in that cabin, the way something dormant in him had suddenly roared to life after millennia of silence. "You're lonely," she whispered, tears streaming down her closed eyelids. "So lonely it's like a physical ache. You've surrounded yourself with people who need you, but you've never let anyone close enough to need you back." Kyle's hand tightened around hers. "Sarah, until now." She opened her eyes, looking directly at him, seeing both the man and the truth beneath. "You're terrified that I'll go back to Silvercrest. Not just because Marcus wants to use me, but because you think if you lose someone else you care about, it'll break something in you that can't be fixed." The silence stretched between them, heavy with revelation. Then Kyle laughed, but it was a raw, broken sound. "I forgot how much the Ashen Blade gift can cut right to the bone. Can you see anything else? Any other secrets I'm keeping?" Sarah concentrated, looking deeper. What she saw made her breath catch. "You're dying," she said softly. "Not quickly, but primordials aren't meant to be alone. Your kind evolved to bond with others, to share power and life force. And you've been alone for so long that your essence is slowly burning out." She squeezed his hand. "That's another reason you created the sanctuary, isn't it? Being around other wolves, even without formal bonds, helps sustain you. But it's not enough. You need a mate bond," Kale finished, his voice rough. "A true one, not just romantic attachment. Primordials bond deeper than pack wolves. It's why we're so rare now. Most of us died rather than bond with someone we didn't truly recognize as ours." He met her eyes. "I have maybe another century before the isolation burns me out completely. I'd made my peace with that. And then you walked into my life and made me want another 3,000 years." The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with impossible implications. Sarah should have been frightened, should have pulled away from the intensity of what he was offering. But her wolf was singing with recognition, and the truth sight that flooded through her showed something that made her heart stutter. When she looked at the bond trying to form between them, it glowed like starlight. Not the heavy restrictive chains of pack bonds, not the controlling threads of alpha dominance, but something ancient and free and absolutely right. 3 days might not be enough time, she said quietly. Then we'll make it enough. Kyle stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. If we're going to unlock your gifts properly, we need to do it somewhere with more space and fewer sleeping witnesses. I know a place. As he led her down toward the lake, their hands still intertwined, Sarah felt the first stirrings of hope that maybe, just maybe, this story wouldn't end with her surrendering to a fate she didn't choose. Maybe this time, she got to write her own ending. Chapter 6. The Lesson in Shadows. Kale led Sarah to a clearing deep in the forest, far enough from the sanctuary that no one would be disturbed by what they were about to attempt. Ancient stones formed a rough circle here, their surfaces worn smooth by countless seasons, and the moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver shafts that made everything feel otherworldly. "This is a sacred space," Kale explained, releasing her hand to gesture at the standing stones. "Older than the packs, older than the council. Places like this are where primordials used to gather during the old times, before territory and hierarchy divided us." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "It's also where the barrier between seen and unseen is thinnest. If we're going to train your gifts, this is the safest place to do it." Sarah walked to the center of the circle, feeling the energy humming beneath her feet. It was different from the comfortable warmth of the sanctuary. This was raw, primal, the kind of power that existed before names or rules were invented. Her wolf stirred with recognition, responding to something ancestral in the very ground. "What do I do?" she asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded despite the nervousness fluttering in her chest. "First, you need to understand that your gift isn't about disappearing. It's about perception." Kale moved to stand in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You don't become invisible. You make others choose not to see you. Their minds slide right past you, convinced you're not worth noticing. It's subtle manipulation of awareness." "That sounds—" Sarah struggled for words. "Invasive. Wrong. It can be, if used maliciously, but it can also be protection, survival. The difference is intent." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing her skin with devastating gentleness. "Your gift manifested to save your life when you were 12. That wasn't wrong, Sarah. That was your wolf doing exactly what she was meant to do, keeping you alive." The validation soothed something raw inside her. "So how do I control it intentionally?" "You already know how? You just don't remember." Kale stepped back, giving her space. "Close your eyes. Think back to that night. Not the violence or the fear. I know that's painful. But the moment right before you vanished from their awareness. What did it feel like?" Sarah wanted to refuse. She'd spent 13 years trying not to think about that night, burying the memories so deep they couldn't hurt her anymore. But Kale's eyes held patience and certainty that she could do this, and somehow that made it bearable. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. The screaming had been the worst part. Not her pack fighting. That had been over quickly, brutally. But the sounds of the rogues searching, destroying, enjoying their slaughter. 12-year-old Sarah had pressed herself into the hall closet, trying not to breathe, not to cry, knowing that if they found her, she would die just like everyone else. She'd felt her wolf then, panicking and desperate. And then something had shifted, like a switch being flipped in her mind. Suddenly, the closet door had opened, a rogue wolf's yellow eyes scanning right past her hiding spot, and he'd moved on. They'd all moved on. Eventually, they'd left, and she'd been alone in the terrible silence. "I felt small," Sarah whispered, eyes still closed. "Like I was folding myself inward, taking up less space, not physically, but in the world's awareness. Like I was telling reality that I didn't matter enough to notice." "Perfect. That's exactly it." Kale's voice was closer now, though she hadn't heard him move. "Now do it again, deliberately. Fold yourself inward and watch what happens." Sarah concentrated, reaching for that sensation of becoming insignificant. It was harder now, without terror fueling her instincts, but slowly she felt the shift beginning. The connection to the world around her grew thinner, more distant, as if she was wrapped in gauze that muffled her presence. "Open your eyes," Kale said softly. She did, and gasped. Kale was still standing right in front of her, but he was looking past her, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if searching for something he'd lost. His gaze swept across where she stood, and there was no recognition in it. Nothing. She'd done it. She was invisible to him. The realization sent a thrill through her, followed immediately by loneliness so acute it physically hurt. Being unseen wasn't just tactical, it was isolation made manifest. No wonder her gift had traumatized her even as it saved her life. "Kyle?" she said tentatively. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. His jaw tightened with frustration as he turned in a slow circle, clearly sensing she was near but unable to pin down her location. Sarah reached out and touched his arm, and the moment her skin made contact with his, the veil shattered. She snapped back into visibility so suddenly that Cale actually startled, his hand flying to her wrist with primordial speed before he registered what had happened. "There you are," he breathed, and the relief in his voice made her chest ache. "I knew you were here, could feel your presence, but I couldn't see you, couldn't focus on where you were. It was like trying to remember a dream that keeps slipping away." "It felt wrong," Sarah admitted, her throat tight. "Being unseen by you felt like I was cutting off something important." Cale's expression softened with understanding. He pulled her closer, one hand sliding around her waist while the other remained on her wrist, as if anchoring her to visibility. "That's because we're bonding. The more connected we become, the harder it will be for you to hide from me. And the harder it will be for me to hide from you. Mates see each other, Sarah. Always. Even through deception and shadow." "We're not mated," she said, but the protest was weak even to her own ears. "Not yet," he agreed, his silver eyes intense. "But can you honestly tell me you don't feel it? This pull between us? It's not just attraction or convenience. It's recognition. Your wolf knows mine, and mine knows yours. We're meant to be, whether we're ready for that truth or not." Sarah's breath hitched. Everything logical in her screamed that this was too fast, too intense, too dangerous. She'd known him barely a day. You couldn't fall in love with someone in a day. But her truth sight had shown her exactly who Cale was beneath the surface. A being of profound loneliness and unwavering honor. Someone who'd spent millennia protecting others while denying himself connection. Someone who'd recognized her as his even before understanding why. "I'm terrified," she whispered, "of feeling this much this fast, of trusting that it's real. Marcus made me think I could be his, and then threw me away like garbage. How do I know this isn't the same? How do I know you won't decide I'm not worth the trouble once the novelty wears off?" Pain flashed across Cale's features. "Because I've lived 3,000 years and never felt this. Because my wolf, ancient and set in his ways, is absolutely certain that losing you would be worse than the isolation that's slowly killing me. Because when I look at you, I don't see an omega or a bloodline or a tactical advantage. I see home." He rested his forehead against hers, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise the council won't make things difficult. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, you will never be thrown away again. You will never be alone again. You will never have to make yourself invisible to survive." Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks, and she didn't try to stop them. 3 days feels like nothing. Then we make it count. Cale pulled back slightly, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "Let's try something else. Your truth sight. Can you activate it at will? Or does it only happen during intense emotion?" Sarah took a shaky breath, grateful for the shift to practical matters even as her heart continued to race. "I don't know. It happened when we touched earlier, but I wasn't trying. Try now. Look at me with that sight and tell me what you see." She reached for the gift tentatively, like probing a healing wound. The world shifted, layers of reality peeling back, and suddenly she was seeing Cale in his essential truth again. The loneliness was still there, but it was softer now, eased by something new. Hope. Connection. The beginning threads of a bond that glowed between them like spun starlight. But there was something else. A shadow coiled in his essence, dark and hungry. "What is that?" Sarah asked, pointing at the darkness even though she knew he couldn't see what she was seeing. "There's something wound through your life force, something that's not supposed to be there." Kyle's expression went carefully neutral. "That's the isolation damage, the slow burn I told you about. It's been growing for centuries." "No." Sarah looked closer, her truth sight sharpening. "This is older than centuries. This is... Kyle. This happened when Isadora died. You didn't just lose your mate. Something broke in you that day. Something that's been bleeding ever since." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then finally, "Primordials aren't meant to outlive their mates. The bond is supposed to take both when one dies. But Isadora was human. The bond was strong, but not complete. Not the way it would be with another shifter. When she died, the bond tried to take me with her. I fought it. I survived. But part of me, the part that knew how to truly connect, stayed with her." Understanding crashed over Sarah. "That's why you've been alone. Not just by choice. You literally can't bond properly anymore. The ability is damaged." "Yes." The word was heavy with ancient grief. "Which is why what I feel for you is impossible. I shouldn't be capable of forming a new mate bond. The darkness you're seeing should prevent it. But somehow, with you..." He touched the space between them, where she could see the starlight threads growing stronger. "It's healing. You're healing what I thought was broken beyond repair." Sarah looked at the bond, at the way it was slowly pushing back the darkness, bringing light to places that had been shadow for millennia. "I'm not doing anything. This is just... happening." "Exactly." Kale's smile was soft, wonderstruck. "Which means this isn't just attraction or circumstance. This is fate, Sarah. Real, actual fate. The kind the old stories spoke of before the pacts corrupted the meaning. 2 days and 12 hours left. That's all they had before she was supposed to return to Silvercrest." Looking at the bond between them, fragile and new but undeniably real, Sarah made a decision. "Teach me everything," she said. "Every gift, every skill, every piece of power my bloodline carries. Because if I'm going back to face Marcus in 2 days, I'm going as someone who knows exactly what she's capable of. Not as a weapon he can control, but as someone who can stand her ground." Kale's expression turned fierce with pride. "Now you're thinking like a primordial. All right, little shadow walker. Let's see just how dangerous you can become." As dawn began to break over the forest, they continued training, and with each passing hour, the bond between them grew stronger. So did Sarah's determination that whatever happened in 2 days, she would face it on her own terms. Even if it meant going to war with the council itself. Chapter 7. The Truth in Blood. By the time the sun fully crested the mountains, Sarah had managed to slip in and out of her shadow-walking gift 6 more times, each instance lasting longer than the previous. Her body ached with exhaustion. Using abilities she'd suppressed her entire life was like exercising muscles that had atrophied. But the satisfaction of control made the pain worthwhile. Kale watched her with the patience of someone who'd spent millennia observing the world, occasionally offering guidance, but mostly letting her find her own rhythm. Now, as she stumbled slightly from the latest attempt, he caught her elbow and steadied her. "Enough for now," he said gently. "Push too hard and you'll burn yourself out. Your wolf needs time to adjust to accessing this much power." "I can keep going." Sarah started to protest, but a wave of dizziness cut her off. "You can, but you shouldn't." Kyle guided her to sit on one of the ancient stones, then crouched in front of her so they were eye level. Learning to wield power isn't just about pushing limits. It's about understanding when rest is as important as practice. The Ashen Blade gift isn't like normal shifting. It draws from your life essence, not just physical energy. Drain yourself too much, and you'll do permanent damage. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her chest, where she could feel her wolf's exhaustion mirroring her own. How do you know so much about Ashen Blade abilities? I thought they were mostly extinct. Something flickered across Kale's face. Old memory, perhaps regret. Because I'm the one who helped the last known Ashen Blade escape the Council's purge. Her name was Elena, and she was 12 years old when her entire bloodline was executed for crimes against pack stability. I hid her for 3 years, taught her to control her gifts so she could stay hidden. He paused. She's the one who told me about the life essence cost. Used her truth sight too many times in one day and nearly killed herself. What happened to her? Sarah asked softly, though something in his expression told her she already knew. She fell in love with a pack wolf. Thought she could trust him with her secret. Kale's jaw tightened. He turned her over to the council for a promotion to beta. They executed her before I could mount a rescue. She was 15 years old. The horror of it settled over Sarah like a shroud. That's why you're so protective of the sanctuary. Why you don't trust the packs. The packs are built on a foundation of control and betrayal. They take vulnerable wolves and convince them that submission equals safety, that questioning authority equals treason. His silver eyes found hers. Elena trusted the wrong person and paid with her life. I won't let that happen to you. Sarah reached out and took his hand, squeezing gently. I'm not 15 and helpless, and I'm not alone. You've made sure of that. No, you're not alone. Kale's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture becoming familiar, comforting. But I need you to understand something, Sarah. If we go through with this bond, if we complete the mate connection, there's no going back. Primordial bonds aren't like pack bonds. They're soul deep, permanent. Even death doesn't completely sever them. Is that supposed to scare me off? It's supposed to give you informed choice. Something the packs never offer. He stood, pulling her up with him. I've lived 3,000 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched the world transform a dozen times over. And you're 25 years old with your whole life ahead of you. If you bind yourself to me, you're choosing to walk beside something ancient and potentially dangerous. I need to know you understand what that means. Sarah studied him, really looked at him with both normal sight and the truth sight that showed her his essence. She saw the loneliness, yes, but also the strength, the honor, the fierce protective instinct that had saved her life and countless others. She saw someone who'd spent millennia taking care of everyone else while denying himself the very thing he needed to survive. I understand that you're trying to give me an out, she said quietly. That you think I'll regret choosing you once reality sets in. But Kale, I've been abandoned twice already. First my birth pack died, then Silvercrest rejected me. I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know what it's like to be treated as disposable. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were almost touching. You're not offering me servitude or control. You're offering me partnership with someone who sees me as an equal. Someone who's teaching me to embrace power instead of fear it. That's worth choosing, even if it comes with complications. Even if those complications include a war with the council. Especially then. Sarah's smile was sharp, her wolf rising to the surface with newfound confidence. Because I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If Marcus and the council want me badly enough to send Shadowguard into neutral territory, then I'm clearly more dangerous than they want me to believe. Time to find out just how dangerous I can be. Pride and desire flashed across Kale's features in equal measure. You're sure about this? About us? No. Sarah admitted honestly. I'm terrified. Everything's happening too fast and nothing about this makes logical sense. But my wolf is sure. My truth sight shows me what we could be. And for the first time in my life, I want to be brave enough to reach for something instead of just surviving. Kyle's hand came up to cup her face, his touch reverent. Then we do this properly. No rushing, no pressure. We have 2 days before you're expected at Silvercrest. We use that time to strengthen your abilities, yes, but also to build this bond the right way. I want you to know exactly who you're choosing, Sarah. All of me. The good, the difficult, and the dangerous. I want the same from you, she said. No pedestals. No treating me like I'm fragile. Show me the primordial who's survived 3 millennia. Show me what I'm really walking into. Something shifted in Kale's expression, a wall coming down, revealing the predator beneath the careful control. His eyes flashed pure silver, and suddenly Sarah could feel the weight of his age, his power, pressing against her awareness like a physical force. This was what he'd been restraining around her, keeping carefully leashed so he wouldn't overwhelm her. This was the creature that had ripped apart the Shadow Guard wolf with casual ease. And Sarah's wolf didn't flinch. Instead, she rose to meet him, her own power, new and untrained but undeniably strong, flaring in response. The air between them crackled with energy as their essences recognized each other, began to align. There you are, Kyle murmured, his voice deeper, touched with the ancient power he usually kept hidden. I was wondering when she'd show herself. Your wolf is magnificent, Sarah. She's been sleeping so long, Sarah whispered, awed by the strength she could feel stirring inside her. I thought she was broken, but she was just waiting. For what? For you. The admission should have felt too vulnerable, too exposed. Instead, it felt like truth settling into place. She was waiting for someone strong enough to stand beside, not someone who'd force her to kneel. Kale's control wavered, and for a moment, Sarah saw raw hunger in his eyes. Not just physical desire, though that was certainly present, but something deeper. The soul-deep need of a being who'd been incomplete for millennia, finally finding the missing piece. We should head back, he said, his voice rough with restraint. The others will be wondering where we are, and you need real rest, not just sitting on rocks. Kale? And I need distance before I do something we're not ready for. He stepped back, breaking the charged tension between them. I meant what I said about doing this properly. You deserve courtship, Sarah. Time to know me beyond crisis and danger. I won't rush you into a bond just because circumstances are pressing. The consideration in his words made her chest ache. Marcus had never asked what she wanted, never cared about her readiness. He'd simply expected submission and been furious when she couldn't provide the air he demanded. Thank you, she said softly, for treating me like I matter. You matter, more than you know. Kale offered his hand, and she took it, their fingers lacing together naturally. Come on. Lyra's probably cooking breakfast, and if we don't show up, she'll come looking for us. That woman is terrifyingly persistent when she thinks someone needs feeding. They walked back through the forest hand in hand, the bond between them humming with potential but not yet complete. Sarah could feel it there, waiting, patient. A choice that would change everything once they were ready to make it. As the sanctuary came into view, smoke rising from cabin chimneys and the sound of morning conversation drifting through the trees, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the absence of problems. Those were definitely still present, counting down to the Silvercrest deadline, but the presence of belonging, of community, of someone who saw her completely and chose her anyway. Kyle, she said as they approached his cabin. When this is over, when we've dealt with Marcus and the council and everything else, Can I stay here? In the sanctuary? He stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Sarah, if we complete this bond, you won't be staying in the sanctuary as a refugee or resident. Her heart sank. Oh, I thought. You'll be staying as my mate, my equal, my partner in running this place. His smile was gentle as understanding dawned on her face. The sanctuary isn't just my territory. It's meant to be led by a bonded pair, Primordial and Ashenblade, strength and truth working together. That's how it was in the old days, before the packs corrupted everything. You wouldn't be a guest here, Sarah. You'd be home. The words settled into her bones like they'd been waiting her whole life to be spoken. Home. Not a place she was permitted to occupy, but a place she belonged. A place she helped create and protect. Then we'd better make sure I survive the next 2 days, Sarah said, her determination crystallizing into resolve. Because I'm not giving up that future without a fight. Kale's answering smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. Now let's get breakfast and plan how to make sure Marcus regrets the day he ever rejected you. As they entered the cabin to find Lyra, Rowan and several others already gathered around the table laden with food, Sarah felt her wolf settle with contentment. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. And that made all the difference. Chapter 8. The Council's Eyes breakfast was a chaotic, warm affair with too many people crammed into Kale's cabin, and conversation flowing as freely as the coffee. Sarah found herself wedged between Lyra and the young shifter named Finn, listening to stories about sanctuary life that made her realize how different this place truly was from traditional packs. No one bowed to Kale. No one asked permission to speak or eat. People argued good-naturedly about chore rotations and teased each other with the ease of genuine family. It was everything pack life was supposed to be, but never was under alpha rule. And then Rowan tried to fix the solar panel himself and nearly fell off the roof, Mira was saying, her eyes dancing with amusement. Kale had to shift mid-leap to catch him. In my defense, Rowan said around a mouthful of eggs, the instructions were in Swedish. You're from Norway, Lyra pointed out. That's not an excuse. Sarah laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd sat at a table and simply enjoyed people's company? At Silvercrest, meals had been formal affairs with strict hierarchy. Alphas ate first, Omegas last, conversation carefully monitored for any hint of dissent. Kyle caught her eye from across the table, and his expression softened with something that looked like contentment. As if seeing her laugh was worth more than any treasure. The moment shattered when Ash burst through the door, their face pale with urgency. Kyle, we have a problem. Eastern perimeter. You need to see this. The temperature in the room dropped as every shifter went instantly alert. Kale was on his feet before anyone else could react, his entire demeanor shifting from relaxed to dangerous in a heartbeat. How many? He asked, voice clipped. Not wolves, cameras, high-tech surveillance equipment hidden in the trees. Someone's been watching us. Ash's hands trembled slightly. Watching her. All eyes turned to Sarah. Her stomach dropped. Show me, Kyle said. He looked at Rowan. Get everyone to secure positions. This could be reconnaissance for something worse. Already on it. Rowan was coordinating with quick gestures, and the sanctuary residents moved with practiced efficiency, their easy camaraderie transforming into a tactical unit in seconds. Sarah stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm coming with you. Sarah, they're here because of me. I'm coming. Her voice held a steel she hadn't known she possessed until recently. Kyle studied her for a moment, then nodded. Stay close. If this goes wrong, I need you where I can protect you. They moved through the forest quickly, following Ash toward the eastern boundary. Lyra and 3 others flanked them, eyes scanning the trees for threats. The morning sunshine that had seemed so peaceful earlier now felt exposing, dangerous. Ash led them to a towering pine near the sanctuary's edge. High in the branches, barely visible against the bark, was a small black device with a lens that reflected the light. "There are 4 more scattered along this section," Ash said quietly. "All positioned to cover the main paths into the valley. Whoever placed them knows what they're doing." Kael's jaw tightened. "How long have they been here? Tech this sophisticated? They're probably motion-activated with cloud storage. Could have been placed any time in the last week." Lyra pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "I'm checking for wireless signals. If they're transmitting real-time..." Her face went pale. "They are. Active stream to an external server. Kael, someone is watching us right now." Sarah's wolf snarled inside her chest. The violation of it, being observed, tracked, hunted even in what should have been safe territory, made her want to shift and destroy something. "Can you trace the signal?" Kael asked. "Working on it." Lyra's fingers continued their rapid dance. "It's encrypted, but I might be able to..." "Got it. Signals bouncing through several proxies, but the final destination is..." She stopped, her expression darkening. "It's registered to the council headquarters in Portland." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. "They're not waiting for the 3-day deadline," Rowan said quietly. "They're preparing." "Preparing for what?" Finn asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Kyle's expression was carved from stone. "An assault. They're mapping our defenses, counting our numbers, looking for weaknesses." His eyes found Sarah's. "They never intended to let you come willingly. Darius's offer was theater. They're planning to take you by force." The certainty in his voice made her blood run cold. "When?" "Soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. But they won't wait the full 3 days. That was just to make us complacent." He turned to the group. "We need to assume they know everything about the sanctuary's layout. Every entrance, every blind spot. Which means staying here puts everyone at risk." "We can fight," Lyra said fiercely. "We've trained for this. We're not helpless." "Against Shadow Guard and Council enforcers? They'll send 30 or 40 trained fighters minimum." Kyle shook his head. "Most of you are refugees, not warriors. I won't ask you to die defending." "You're not asking. We're choosing." Rowan's voice was firm and murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. "This is our home. We stand and defend it, or we're no better than the packs that cast us out." Sarah watched the determination on every face and felt something crack open in her chest. These people, strangers a day ago, were willing to fight for her. Die for her. She couldn't let that happen. "There's another option," she said quietly, and every eye turned to her. "I go to them. Tonight. Not to Silvercrest, to wherever they're staging the assault. I walk right into their camp and use my shadow walking to sabotage them from the inside." "Absolutely not," Kyle said immediately. "That's suicide." "Is it? I can make myself invisible. I can see truth through deception. I can find out exactly what they're planning and disrupt it before they launch an attack." Sarah stepped closer to him, needing him to understand. "You've spent all morning teaching me how to use these gifts. Let me use them to protect the people who've protected me. You've had less than 12 hours of training. And whose fault is that? The pack spent my entire life suppressing what I could do, making me think I was weak and broken." Her voice rose with passion. "I'm not weak, Kale. You showed me that. My bloodline was hunted to extinction because we were dangerous to the council. Time to remind them why." Kale looked like he wanted to argue, but Lyra spoke first. "She's right. They won't expect her to go on the offensive. They think she's a frightened Omega running from rejection. A fierce smile crossed her face. They have no idea what's coming. Even if we agree to this plan, which I'm not saying I do, she can't go alone, Rowan said. Someone needs to provide backup in case things go wrong. I'll go, Kyle said immediately. I can move undetected when I need to. And if it does turn into a fight, I'm the only one here with the power to face council enforcers head-on. No. Sarah grabbed his arm. You're the sanctuary's leader. If something happens to you, everyone here loses their protection. I need you here keeping them safe. And I need you alive, Kale growled, his control fracturing. You think I can just let you walk into danger while I stay behind? You think I'm capable of that? I think you're capable of trusting me to handle this. Sarah softened her voice, aware of their audience but needing him to hear her. I'm not asking for permission, Kyle. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can either help me prepare or waste time arguing. The muscle in his jaw jumped as he fought some internal battle. Finally, he turned to Ash. Go get the detailed maps of the Northern Territories. If we're doing this, we're doing it smart. He looked back at Sarah, silver eyes blazing with emotion he was barely containing. But you follow my lead on tactics. You've got power, but I've got 3,000 years of combat experience. Understood? Understood. Good. He turned to address the group. Everyone else, I want security rotations doubled. No one goes anywhere alone. If they're watching us, we watch right back. Lyra, see if you can hack into their surveillance feed. If we can see what they see, we might spot their attack plan. Orders given, the group dispersed with military efficiency. Sarah found herself alone with Kale as they walked back toward his cabin, the weight of what they were planning settling over her like armor. You're terrified, Kyle said quietly. Not a question. Yes. No point lying. But I'm also angry, and tired of being hunted, and ready to stop running. He stopped walking and pulled her into his arms, the embrace fierce and protective. Sarah melted into him, breathing in his scent, pine and rain and wild things, and feeling her wolf settle at the contact. If anything happens to you, he murmured against her hair, I will burn the council to the ground. Every alpha, every enforcer, every enabler who let this system flourish. They'll learn what it means to threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like safety, like being claimed by someone who saw her as precious rather than property. Nothing's going to happen, she promised, pulling, back to meet his eyes. Because I have too much to come back to. A home, a family, a mate who's waiting for me. Kale's thumb traced her bottom lip, the gesture intimate and yearning. We haven't completed the bond yet. No, Sarah agreed, rising on her toes to rest her forehead against his. But we will. When this is over and the council isn't breathing down our necks, we'll do it properly. The way it's meant to be done. Is that a promise? It's a vow. She pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, chaste but weighted with intention. I'm choosing you, Kale Thornwood. I'm choosing us. Nothing the council does will change that. His arms tightened around her, and for a moment, they stood in the forest wrapped in each other, two souls recognizing their match despite impossible circumstances. Then duty called them back, and they separated to prepare for the night ahead. A night that would determine whether they'd have a future together, or whether the council would tear apart everything they were building before it could fully bloom. Sarah touched the place where the bond hummed in her chest, drawing strength from its presence. Whatever happened tonight, she wouldn't face it as a broken Omega. She'd face it as an ashen blade awakening to her power. And the council had no idea what storm was coming for them. Chapter 9. Into the Wolf's Den. Night fell over the sanctuary like a held breath. The moon obscured by clouds that seemed to understand the need for darkness. Sarah stood in Kyle's cabin, dressed in black tactical clothing Lyra had procured from somewhere, checking her gear one final time. A small earpiece would keep her connected to Kyle, who would maintain position a quarter-mile out, close enough to respond to trouble, far enough not to trigger alarms. "Remember," Kyle said for the third time, unable to hide his tension, "you're gathering intelligence, not engaging. Get in, find out what they're planning, and get out. If anything feels wrong, I pull back immediately. I know." Sarah turned to face him, seeing the fear he was trying to mask beneath tactical planning. "Kyle, I'll be careful, I promise." He closed the distance between them, hands coming up to frame her face with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the warrior he'd become since they'd found the cameras. "I'm 3,000 years old, and I've never been more terrified than I am right now. That should tell you something about what you mean to me. It tells me you care." She covered his hands with hers. "And that gives me a reason to come back safely." Lyra had traced the surveillance signal to an abandoned lumber mill 15 miles north, far enough from the sanctuary to stage without immediate detection, close enough to strike quickly. Aerial reconnaissance using Finn's drone had confirmed at least 20 wolves on site, with more likely inside the main building. 20 against 1 didn't seem like fair odds, but Sarah wasn't planning to fight them. She was planning to disappear. "Test the connection," Kale said, stepping back reluctantly and tapping his own earpiece. Sarah activated hers. "Can you hear me?" "Perfectly. Remember, I'll be monitoring everything. One word and I'm coming in." "One word," she agreed, though they both knew that if things went wrong badly enough for her to call for help, it might already be too late. The drive to the staging area was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Kyle parked the truck in a concealed spot a mile from the mill, and they covered the remaining distance on foot through dense forest. The night was alive with sounds, owls hunting, small creatures scurrying through underbrush, the distant rush of a stream. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, a stark contrast to what they were walking toward. They stopped at the agreed-upon position, a rocky outcropping that gave visual access to the mill while maintaining cover. Kyle pulled out binoculars and surveyed the scene below. In the moonlight breaking through clouds, Sarah could see the main building, a massive structure with broken windows and rusted equipment scattered around it. Wolves moved between buildings with military precision, some in human form, others shifted. "I count 23 visible," Kale murmured. "At least a dozen more inside based on the light patterns. This is a full assault team." He lowered the binoculars, his expression grim. "Shadow Guard, Council Enforcers, and regular pack warriors. They're not taking chances." Sarah's heart hammered, but she pushed down the fear. "Where's the best entry point?" "Southwest corner. That broken window 3 buildings over. It's in a blind spot between patrol routes." He handed her a small device. "This is a signal jammer. Activate it when you get inside. It'll block their communications for about 10 minutes before they realize what's happening and switch to backups. Use that window to gather what you need." She took the device, tucking it into her pocket. Then she pulled out a small knife Rowan had given her, not for fighting, but for protection. Just in case. "Sarah." Kyle caught her wrist, his touch gentle but urgent. "If you see Marcus or any of the council members, do not confront them. Promise me." "I promise. Intelligence only." She stood on tiptoe and pressed a quick kiss to his lips, their first real kiss, brief and born of desperation, but it sent electricity racing through her veins. "For luck." Kyle's eyes flashed silver, and for a moment she thought he might refuse to let her go. Then he kissed her back, deeper, claiming her mouth with a hunger that spoke of possession and fear and need all tangled together. When he pulled away, they were both breathing hard. "Come back to me," he whispered. "That's not a request. It's a requirement." "Yes, Alpha," she said with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment even as her heart felt like it might crack. I'm not your alpha, he corrected softly. I'm your mate. There's a difference. With those words, warming her chest, Sarah activated her shadow-walking gift. The world shifted, her presence folding inward until she became something the eye wanted to skip over. Kale's expression showed the strain of seeing her, but not being able to focus. His wolf fighting against the perception manipulation. She mouthed, "I love you." Words she hadn't planned to say, that came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. And then she was moving down the hillside before she could see his reaction. The descent required careful attention. Shadow walking made others overlook her, but it didn't make her invisible to obstacles. She picked her way between trees and over rocks, her senses hyper-alert for any sign that the patrol routes had changed. The first wolf passed within 3 feet of her, a large gray male in shifted form. His nose twitched as if catching a scent, but then he shook his head and continued his circuit. The gift was holding. Sarah reached the target building and slipped through the broken window, landing in a crouch on rotted floorboards that groaned softly under her weight. She froze, but no alarm sounded. The interior was dark except for light spilling from a doorway at the far end. Voices drifted from that direction, male, authoritative, discussing logistics. She crept forward, each step carefully placed to avoid debris. The jammer stayed in her pocket for now. She needed to hear what they were saying first. Mobilize at 0400. That gives them one more night of false security. That voice was familiar. Marcus. Sarah's wolf snarled recognition, but she pushed down the instinctive response. Control. She needed control. And the primordial? Another voice, older, carrying the weight of authority. He won't go down easily. He won't need to go down permanently, just long enough for us to extract the Omega and neutralize the sanctuary residents. Marcus sounded pleased with himself. Once we have her, Thornwood will negotiate. He's sentimental about his strays. You're certain she's worth this effort? One wolf with unproven abilities seems like a substantial resource investment. Councilman Reeves, I've seen the archival records. The Ashen Blades weren't just shadow walkers and truth seers. Marcus's voice dropped, taking on an excited edge. There's a third gift, one that only manifests in bloodline carriers who survive trauma and rejection. Sarah's breath caught. A third gift? The texts call it the Alpha's Bane. An Ashen Blade who's awakened all 3 gifts can sever pack bonds at will. Imagine it. The ability to tear apart enemy packs from the inside, break the alpha connection that gives them power. She could walk through Silvercrest's enemies and leave nothing but chaos in her wake. Horror crawled up Sarah's spine. That's what they wanted. Not a Luna. Not even just a tactical advantage. They wanted a weapon that could destroy pack structure itself. If she's that powerful, what makes you think you can control her? Reeves asked, voicing the question Sarah was thinking. Because power without training is useless. She doesn't even know this gift exists. Marcus's confidence was absolute. By the time we've educated her on what she can do, she'll be bonded to me through the Luna ceremony. She'll have no choice but to obey. The mate bond will ensure her loyalty. Unless Thornwood's already bonded with her. He hasn't. Our surveillance shows physical proximity but no bonding rituals. The primordial is too cautious, too concerned with consent and proper courtship. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. His sentimentality is his weakness. We'll exploit it. Sarah had heard enough. She needed to get this information back to Kale, needed to warn him that the attack was coming in less than 6 hours. She began backing toward the window, but her boot caught on something. A piece of metal piping she hadn't seen in the darkness. It clattered against the floor. Silence fell in the other room. "What was that?" Reeves demanded. Footsteps approached rapidly. Sarah dove for the window, but a body blocked her path. Darius in human form, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he somehow registered her presence despite the shadow walking. "Impossible," he breathed. "You shouldn't be—" Sarah didn't wait for him to finish. She activated the signal jammer and bolted, her gift flickering with her panic. Darius grabbed for her, his hand catching her arm, and the contact shattered her concentration completely. She snapped back into visibility just as 3 more wolves burst into the room. "There!" Marcus's shout was triumphant. "I knew she'd come. Take her alive." Sarah kicked hard at Darius's knee. The self-defense training Rowan had crammed into her earlier that day taking over. He stumbled, his grip loosening enough for her to tear free. She ran for the window, knowing she'd never make it but unable to give up. A wolf tackled her from the side, driving her to the ground. The impact drove the air from her lungs, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Strong hands pinned her arms. "Careful," Marcus said, emerging from the doorway with a smile that made Sarah's stomach turn. "Our future Luna is delicate. We wouldn't want to damage her before the ceremony." "Kale!" Sarah gasped into her earpiece, praying it hadn't been damaged in the fall. "They're coming at 0400. Third gift. Alpha's Bane. I can sever pack bonds. That's what they want. Kale!" Marcus reached down and ripped the earpiece from her ear, crushing it beneath his boot. "No more warnings to your primordial. You're ours now, Sarah. You've always been ours. You just didn't know it yet." Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision as something sharp pricked her neck. A sedative, probably. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Marcus's satisfied expression and Darius's conflicted eyes. The last thing she felt was the mate bond in her chest, screaming in distress, calling for Kale with a desperation that transcended words. And then there was nothing. Kale heard the commotion through his earpiece, the clatter, the shouts, Sarah's desperate warning, and his world narrowed to a single, primal need. Get to her. He was moving before conscious thought, shifting mid-leap into his primordial form, a creature of nightmare and legend racing through the forest with 3 millennia of fury driving every step. The mill was 15 seconds away at his top speed. He prayed that would be fast enough. Behind him, trees shook as something ancient and terrible tore through the night, willing to burn down the world if it meant saving the woman who'd finally made him want to live again. Chapter 9. Into the wolf's den. Night fell over the sanctuary like a held breath, the moon obscured by clouds that seemed to understand the need for darkness. Sarah stood in Kale's cabin, dressed in black tactical clothing Lyra had procured from somewhere, checking her gear one final time. A small earpiece would keep her connected to Kale, who would maintain position a quarter-mile out, close enough to respond to trouble, far enough not to trigger alarms. "Remember," Kale said for the 3rd time, unable to hide his tension. "You're gathering intelligence, not engaging. Get in, find out what they're planning, and get out. If anything feels wrong—" "I pull back immediately, I know." Sarah turned to face him, seeing the fear he was trying to mask beneath tactical planning. "Kale, I'll be careful, I promise." He closed the distance between them, hands coming up to frame her face with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the warrior he'd become since they'd found the cameras. "I'm 3,000 years old, and I've never been more terrified than I am right now. That should tell you something about what you mean to me." "It tells me you care." She covered his hands with hers. "And that gives me a reason to come back safely." Lyra had traced the surveillance signal to an abandoned lumber mill 15 miles north. Far enough from the sanctuary to stage without immediate detection, close enough to strike quickly. Aerial reconnaissance using Finn's drone had confirmed at least 20 wolves on site, with more likely inside the main building. 20 against 1 didn't seem like fair odds, but Sarah wasn't planning to fight them. She was planning to disappear. "Test the connection," Kale said, stepping back reluctantly and tapping his own earpiece. Sarah activated hers. "Can you hear me?" "Perfectly. Remember, I'll be monitoring everything. One word and I'm coming in." "One word," she agreed, though they both knew that if things went wrong badly enough for her to call for help, it might already be too late. The drive to the staging area was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Kyle parked the truck in a concealed spot a mile from the mill, and they covered the remaining distance on foot through dense forest. The night was alive with sounds. Owls hunting, small creatures scurrying through underbrush, the distant rush of a stream. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. A stark contrast to what they were walking toward. They stopped at the agreed-upon position, a rocky outcropping that gave visual access to the mill while maintaining cover. Kale pulled out binoculars and surveyed the scene below. In the moonlight breaking through clouds, Sarah could see the main building, a massive structure with broken windows and rusted equipment scattered around it. Wolves moved between buildings with military precision, some in human form, others shifted. "I count 23 visible," Kyle murmured. "At least a dozen more inside based on the light patterns. This is a full assault team." He lowered the binoculars, his expression grim. "Shadow Guard, Council Enforcers, and regular pack warriors. They're not taking chances." Sarah's heart hammered, but she pushed down the fear. "Where's the best entry point?" "Southwest corner. That broken window 3 buildings over. It's in a blind spot between patrol routes." He handed her a small device. "This is a signal jammer. Activate it when you get inside. It'll block their communications for about 10 minutes before they realize what's happening and switch to backups. Use that window to gather what you need." She took the device, tucking it into her pocket. Then she pulled out a small knife Rowan had given her, not for fighting, but for protection, just in case. "Sarah." Kyle caught her wrist, his touch gentle but urgent. "If you see Marcus or any of the council members, do not confront them. Promise me." "I promise. Intelligence only." She stood on tiptoe and pressed a quick kiss to his lips, their first real kiss, brief and born of desperation, but it sent electricity racing through her veins. "For luck." Kale's eyes flashed silver, and for a moment, she thought he might refuse to let her go. Then he kissed her back, deeper, claiming her mouth with a hunger that spoke of possession and fear and need all tangled together. When he pulled away, they were both breathing hard. "Come back to me," he whispered. "That's not a request. It's a requirement." "Yes, Alpha," she said with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment even as her heart felt like it might crack. "I'm not your Alpha," he corrected softly. "I'm your mate. There's a difference." With those words warming her chest, Sarah activated her shadow-walking gift. The world shifted, her presence folding inward until she became something the eye wanted to skip over. Kale's expression showed the strain of seeing her but not being able to focus, his wolf fighting against the perception manipulation. She mouthed, "I love you," words she hadn't planned to say, that came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought, and then she was moving down the hillside before she could see his reaction. The descent required careful attention. Shadow walking made others overlook her, but it didn't make her invisible to obstacles. She picked her way between trees and over rocks, her senses hyper-alert for any sign that the patrol routes had changed. The first wolf passed within 3 feet of her, a large gray male in shifted form. His nose twitched as if catching a scent, but then he shook his head and continued his circuit. The gift was holding. Sarah reached the target building and slipped through the broken window, landing in a crouch on rotted floorboards that groaned softly under her weight. She froze, but no alarm sounded. The interior was dark except for light spilling from a doorway at the far end. Voices drifted from that direction, male, authoritative, discussing logistics. She crept forward, each step carefully placed to avoid debris. The jammer stayed in her pocket for now. She needed to hear what they were saying first. Mobilize at 0400. That gives them one more night of false security. That voice was familiar. Marcus. Sarah's wolf snarled recognition, but she pushed down the instinctive response. Control. She needed control. And the primordial? Another voice, older, carrying the weight of authority. He won't go down easily. He won't need to go down permanently. Just long enough for us to extract the Omega and neutralize the sanctuary residents. Marcus sounded pleased with himself. Once we have her, Thornwood will negotiate. He's sentimental about his strays. You're certain she's worth this effort? One wolf with unproven abilities seems like a substantial resource investment. Councilman Reeves, I've seen the archival records. The Ashenblades weren't just shadow walkers and truth seers. Marcus's voice dropped, taking on an excited edge. There's a third gift. One that only manifests in bloodline carriers who survive trauma and rejection. Sarah's breath caught. A third gift? The texts call it the Alpha's Bane. An Ashenblade who's awakened all three gifts can sever pack bonds at will. Imagine it. The ability to tear apart enemy packs from the inside. Break the Alpha connection that gives them power. She could walk through Silvercrest's enemies and leave nothing but chaos in her wake. Horror crawled up Sarah's spine. That's what they wanted. Not a Luna. Not even just a tactical advantage. They wanted a weapon that could destroy pack structure itself. If she's that powerful, what makes you think you can control her? Reeves asked, voicing the question Sarah was thinking. Because power without training is useless. She doesn't even know this gift exists. Marcus's confidence was absolute. By the time we've educated her on what she can do, she'll be bonded to me through the Luna ceremony. She'll have no choice but to obey. The mate bond will ensure her loyalty. Unless Thornwood's already bonded with her. He hasn't. Our surveillance shows physical proximity but no bonding rituals. The primordial is too cautious, too concerned with consent and proper courtship. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. His sentimentality is his weakness. We'll exploit it. Sarah had heard enough. She needed to get this information back to Cale. Needed to warn him that the attack was coming in less than 6 hours. She began backing toward the window, but her boot caught on something. A piece of metal piping she hadn't seen in the darkness. It clattered against the floor. Silence fell in the other room. What was that? Reeves demanded. Footsteps approached rapidly. Sarah dove for the window, but a body blocked her path. Darius in human form, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he somehow registered her presence despite the shadow walking. Impossible, he breathed. You shouldn't be... Sarah didn't wait for him to finish. She activated the signal jammer and bolted, her gift flickering with her panic. Darius grabbed for her, his hand catching her arm, and the contact shattered her concentration completely. She snapped back into visibility just as 3 more wolves burst into the room. There! Marcus's shout was triumphant. I knew she'd come. Take her alive! Sarah kicked hard at Darius's knee, the self-defense training Rowan had crammed into her earlier that day taking over. He stumbled, his grip loosening enough for her to tear free. She ran for the window, knowing she'd never make it but unable to give up. A wolf tackled her from the side, driving her to the ground. The impact drove the air from her lungs, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Strong hands pinned her arms. Careful, Marcus said, emerging from the doorway with a smile that made Sarah's stomach turn. Our future Luna is delicate. We wouldn't want to damage her before the ceremony. Cale! Sarah gasped into her earpiece, praying it hadn't been damaged in the fall. They're coming at 0400. Third gift, Alpha's Bane. I can sever pack bonds. That's what they want. Cale... Marcus reached down and ripped the earpiece from her ear, crushing it beneath his boot. No more warnings to your primordial. You're ours now, Sarah. You've always been ours. You just didn't know it yet. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision as something sharp pricked her neck. A sedative, probably. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Marcus's satisfied expression and Darius's conflicted eyes. The last thing she felt was the mate bond in her chest, screaming in distress, calling for Cale with a desperation that transcended words. And then there was nothing. Cale heard the commotion through his earpiece, the clatter, the shouts, Sarah's desperate warning, and his world narrowed to a single, primal need. Get to her. He was moving before conscious thought, shifting mid-leap into his primordial form, a creature of nightmare and legend racing through the forest with 3 millennia of fury driving every step. The mill was 15 seconds away at his top speed. He prayed that would be fast enough. Behind him, trees shook as something ancient and terrible tore through the night, willing to burn down the world if it meant saving the woman who'd finally made him want to live again.